Hello, and welcome to this ClearCheck training for new users. This video will go over the basic workflow of ClearCheck, adding and editing dose constraints, using collision check, as well as the many features that are available within the ClearCheck module. To start off, I have a very classic 7-field static IMRT prostate case. So to run ClearCheck, we're going to come up to the Tools menu, open up the scripts, and find ClearCheck in the list. So you can create a shortcut by simply saying add. You have the opportunity to assign a hotkey. So you can choose any combination that you like. Then go ahead and say OK. Now you can see it's designated as a favorite. And what that means is the next time we come up to this Tools menu, we'll see ClearCheck from that dropdown and then also that hotkey. So we can just simply click that button on our keyboard to launch into ClearCheck. All right, now the first time that you run ClearCheck on a patient, it's going to bring you into this template manager screen. So this is where we'll do all of our editing, assign our templates. And I know that I'm in template manager because I see this green bar across the top. Now a quick overview of this workspace over here in the top left, this is the patient templates area. So this will list all of the templates that have been assigned to the patient. Down here at the bottom, this is our list of master templates that are available. And then in this main section, once we load a template, we'll see all of our dose constraints, and that's where we'll be able to do all of our editing. Here across the top, we have our dose constraint template area, our structure check template area, plan checks, treat prep checks, and our report templates. So each tab here across the top will allow you to edit and add templates for those respective sections in ClearCheck. All right, and then over here we have our save button, undo and redo, very helpful as you're going through the editing. So let's go ahead and add a template to this patient. So you can come in here, start typing the area that you want to treat. This will filter the list for you. Alternatively, you can use a folder and that will be set up in admin. All right, so then once you find the template here in the list, a single click will bring it into a kind of preview mode. You'll be able to see, make sure this is the right template that you want. And then when you're ready, click the plus button to add it to the patient. Now you can see it in our list of patient templates up here in the top left. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our prescription is correct. So you can either hand type this by double clicking. Alternatively, you can use this use Eclipse plan total dose as 100%. When you do that, that prescription box disappears. It's going to look at your Eclipse plan and just pull in whatever prescription is there. So it's a good shortcut. However, this option will fail when it comes to a plan sum. So in that case, you have multiple prescriptions. When ClearCheck looks back at Eclipse for which prescription to pull, it's not going to know which one is correct. So you may see a red bar across the top, an error. In that case, just come back, uncheck this if this is checked, and then you can manually type in that prescription. So a helpful shortcut for single phase plans will not work if you are using this on a plan sum. Just a good tidbit to know there. You can add prescriptions or copy prescriptions. So again, if you had a multi-phase plan, you could add prescription lines in here. All right, so then we're going to basically work left to right through our dose constraint rows here. The first one is our priority, which we can change. The default right now is just 1 through however many dose constraints that you have, but you can change these. This next column here is the structure template name. So this is what we've called it in our template. And that's going to go with this structure plan name. So when I open this up, these are all of the contours from my plan. And the objective here is to make sure that everything matches up. Now you can see I did have a few mismatches. So down here for my CTV, this one is blank. If I open this up, it is because in this case, I have a GTV instead of a CTV. So I can just either match these up and the dose constraint stays the same, or if I would prefer to, make this match up 100%, I'll call this GTV and then select that GTV from my plan. We also have the ability to create aliases. So you can see in my template for my bowel, it was called bowel_small, but in my contour list, I simply just called it bowel. But because that was an alias option, it went ahead and auto associated that for me. All right, so just scrolling through, make sure everything matches. Down here, it looks like my femur right. It grabbed it from my alias list. And then for my femur left, I'm going to go ahead and just pull that one in. All right, so then working across, we have 2 types, either target or OAR. And right now, these don't bear any significance other than just a label. So you can use this for sorting if you just want to have all of your targets at the top. This next column here is the prescription column, and you will only see this if you are using relative dose constraint. And now we're going to move on to the constraint type. So if I go ahead and open this up, you can see there is quite a long list of options for things that we can automatically evaluate in ClearCheck. So we have all of the most common ones right here at the top: volume, dose, max, min, mean. Then as we get towards the middle here, these are going to be more for your SBRT, SRS, so conformality index, gradient index, dose spill, max dose table. And then down towards the bottom, they get a little bit more sophisticated. It's not common to use these, but they are available. And then in this last section here, this is our actual constraint. So I'm just going to double click, and you can see it's just a free text area. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have all of these constraint examples. So we have three options: absolute dose, relative dose, and then dose tracking. So absolute dose means you're going to type an actual value in here. So in this case, the example is V20 or V2000 centigrade, and then you decide what your goal is. For relative dose, which this is in right now, you are going to set it as a percentage of your prescription. So in this case, this is saying V100% greater than 98%. So the volume getting 100% of my prescription should be greater than 98%. And so when you use this relative, we have to define what that prescription is. So V100% is going to be part of this prescription, 8100 centigrade, which we define up here. And now this plays a very big role in multiple dose levels, either SIB, plan sums, those types of things. All right, now scrolling down, you can see we have a mix here of volume, dose, min dose, some max dose, dose constraints. And I just want to take a moment and talk about this max dose. So in this case, the max dose constraint, as well as that min, so this max and min options here, these are going to be pixel max and pixel min. Very important to know. If you are interested in a volumetric max, so that dose to 0.03 cc's, I'll show you how you can add that in. So we'll come down here, we'll add a new dose constraint, and we'll just go ahead and add this to, let's say, our bladder. Goes ahead and grabs that right from our contour list since that's already been matched up. And then I'm going to come in and choose dose, and I'm going to say D for dose to 0.03 cc's should be less than, and I can say, 100%. And that's going to say, okay, 100% of my prescription. What is my prescription? And I can come choose that from this drop down. In this case, I only have the one prescription, so it's going to go ahead and be that 8100 centigrade. The nice thing here in ClearCheck, anything that has 6 black dots means that it can be reordered. So I'm going to just click and drag and put this with the rest of my bladder dose constraint. All right, so in keeping with the theme of editing, we do have a series of icons down here across the bottom. I just want to take a moment to talk about each one of these. So add constraint, you just saw me use this to add a new dose constraint. We can also copy constraints. So as you're going through either adding a series of dose constraints or you have several that are very, very close to one another, you can just copy, and then you can see you can make small edits here. So if I wanted to make this max dose, also 4000, you could do that. The next one is going to be delete. So you can delete dose constraints. You can also copy constraints between templates. So this is a really handy tool if you are building custom templates that pull a few dose constraints from Timmerman, a few dose constraints from the RTOG. You can mix and match those templates very easily by using this copy dose constraint. So in this case, you highlight the ones that you want to move. This will open up a choice for which template you want to put them in, and then you simply say copy. The next option here is disable constraint. So this is a really great tool for really big templates that have a lot of OARs or a lot of targets, but on a particular patient, those may not apply. So for instance, a head and neck, you have all of the OARs in your dose constraint template, but we'll say we're just treating the larynx. So we're not worried about brachial plexus, we're not worried about the optic nerves, the cochleas, things like that. They're just so far outside of the field, they haven't even been drawn. In that case, you can just set them to not applicable or disable constraint. So you really have an option. You can either delete those dose constraints or just disable them. Disabling them or setting them as not applicable gives you the advantage of having them still remain as part of the template and just saying that these were not relevant versus deleting, they're just kind of gone. This match structure plan, if you start to add a whole bunch of new dose constraints in there, this match structure will kind of force that rematch process that happens when you first load the dose constraints. And then this one here, scale absolute, let me come down here to an absolute dose constraint. And then when I click on this, I have the opportunity to scale it based off of a factor. So this would be the relationship between two of our prescriptions. All right, so let's say we're happy with all of these dose constraints. These look good. And so let's save what we've done so far. And we're just going to head back into that main evaluation screen. So clicking on that check mark brings us into our main evaluation of ClearCheck. And now we know we're in our main evaluation because we see this rad formation blue bar across the top. And then we're looking at our template name, our prescription box, all of those OARs and targets that we've put in, and then our dose constraints with our results. So here it's got the name of the plan that we're reviewing, prostate IMRT, and that also corresponds to this area over here on the left. So on the left, we get a lot of that repeat information. So we have our constraint template that we're using. We haven't loaded the other templates for the sections yet, so we'll get to that in a moment. And then we have our course, the plan that we're reviewing, and this is the dose from Eclipse. All right, and then over here, just looking at our results one more time, these are color-coded. So green check for passing, red X for failing. And then we have this blue triangle, which is similar to the language of minor deviation, deviation acceptable. So in this case, 107 to 110 is that range of acceptable values. If the max dose had been less than 107, we would have seen a green check. If it had been greater than 110, we would have seen a red X, but since it is falling within that range, that secondary goal, we're getting this blue triangle. All right, now for anything that is failing, you have the option of saying verify OK, and that also works on conditional. So what you would do is you could say verify OK. This is going to change that red X to a gold check mark. It's going to say who verified it with a time and a date stamp. And then if you double click in the space just below, you have the opportunity to also leave a comment. Now, if you would rather have the physician's credentials when you set that up, you're going to come up here to switch user. And when they log in, those verify OKs will come back under their name. And then when they're all done and you're ready to start printing the plan or moving on to the next step, you can just come back, click on this one more time, and it will automatically revert back to the person who is logged into ARIA. All right, so another thing I wanted to point out that any changes that we have made to our dose constraint template will be bold. So you can see here, I changed this from CTV to GTV, and now that name has been bolded, as well as added this bladder dose constraint. So that is also showing as bold. All right, so I just want to talk about a few more things before we head back into Template Manager and assign the rest of those templates. We're going to just discuss the interface here in this main evaluation window very quickly. So I briefly talked about this left-hand side panel here. We have all of our information, our templates listed here, which plan we're reviewing. And then here across the top, we can close out of ClearCheck. We can save if we've made any changes. This will just toggle that side section on or off. This will generate our report, and this button is the same as this report button here. They do the same thing. We can compare two treatment plans. So if I click on this button here, you can see it will open up a second drop down here on the left. And then I can simply open this up, choose any other plan that is open in Eclipse, and you are not limited to being within the same course. If you have multiple courses open, you can choose any plan that is visualized in Eclipse. And then when I click on that plan, you can see that it's going to quickly rerun those results, looking at now both of those plans. So we'll see our prostate IMRT plan that we were just reviewing lined up right next to that prostate BAD, and then the results for each one of those here in the color-coded green, red, and blue, and the dose difference. And then in this last column, you will see a green check if they are both passing, a red X if they are both failing. But if one is passing and the other is not, you will see the name of the plan that is passing listed out here. All right, so then to uncompare plans, just uncheck that button across the top and you go back to your original plan. This is our button to get back into Template Manager, so to get back into that editing screen. Our collision check, clear calc, portal dosimetry, and auto contour. And then over here on the right hand side, we have our patient name, their ID number, the switch user, which we just talked about, our admin application, toggle for this right hand panel, as well as our information button. So here in this information button, we're going to have the version number, our information here, as well as our keyboard shortcuts and our user manual. So if you have any questions, it's always helpful to be able to link right to that user manual and see if you can get some help. And then the patient messages area is a great way to leave some candid notes about the planning process and be able to communicate internally as you're going through the plan approval, the plan printing, and the plan checks. All right, so those are kind of all the main sections here in ClearCheck. Let's head back into Template Manager, add in the rest of those templates, and finish our evaluation. So I'm going to open the folder icon here across the top. So the next thing that we're going to work on is our structure checks. So there are two ways to load your structure checks. The first way is if you had all of these built out in admin, you'd come over here, find your structure check template, much like you did with your dose constraint check template, and then add that to your patient. If that has not been done, a very easy way to create a structure check template is to come in here to your constraints area. And in this string of icons here, we have this create structure template from constraint templates. So once you click on this S button, you can see it automatically brought us into this structure check area. It has created a structure check template based off of all of the dose constraints that are in our dose constraint template. So we have everything that we've already matched up, any of those changes that we've made, it pulled all of that over for us. Now ClearCheck is going to do a number of structure checks. The first one is looking for stray pixels, and you can set the threshold here. It's also going to look for holes in the volume. And then it can also check the distance to CT end. So this is great for targets, making sure that it hasn't been drawn too close to either the top or the bottom of the CT, where if you're optimizing, trying to calculate, you don't have enough CT to really properly calculate that scatter dose. So that's a good check. Slice gaps, just anything that needs to be checked for interpolation. Inside the body, this is a great one for all of the contours to make sure that everything fits within that body contour. You don't have any stray pixels out in space. High resolution, this is for any contours that should be contoured in high resolution. So things like optic chiasm, the optic nerves, or the cochlea. You would just check this box and it will make sure that that is done. And then laterality. So down here for our femurs, we can choose right for our right femur and left for our left femur. So we're telling ClearCheck, I expect this contour to fall on the patient's right side of the body and this contour to fall on the patient's left side of the body, and it will double check that that is correct. Now this last column here, contradicting constraints, you can turn this on for your targets. And what this will do is look through your dose constraints and identify if there are any infeasible dose constraints due to overlap. And then two more checks down here, the support structures outside of the body. So making sure that if you've added in any of those support structures, such as the couch or the couch with rails, that you haven't accidentally overlapped with the body and kind of overridden that last little bit. And then the bolus thickness here, that's going to do an independent calculation of your bolus thickness. So if you believe that you've put a 1 centimeter bolus on this patient, then it's going to calculate that, make sure that the average thickness is about 1 centimeter. If there's no bolus on the plan, it'll just say no bolus found. Now, similar to your dose constraints, you can also come in here, add a structure, copy a structure, things like that. Works very similar. Now there are two other types of checks that we can do, the margin expansion check and the nesting check, and they kind of go hand in hand with each other. So I'm going to come in here and add a margin check. So this is going to check from the source to the expanded structure, does it fall within my margin? So I'm going to come in here and say my source structure is going to be my GTV, and I can find that GTV from my plan, and my expanded structure is going to be my PTV. So I can also come in here and just say match, and it will pull it for me. And now the last thing we have to tell ClearCheck is what I expect that margin has been. So if you have accepted values that your clinic always follows prostate cases, you could certainly come in here and put that in. In this case, I'm expecting that my prostate has been expanded 5 millimeters from GTV to PTV. And so then this will do an independent vector calculation and make sure that that expansion has been done exactly the way we expected. If you want to do an asymmetric expansion, simply uncheck this box here, and then you have the ability to type in those individual distances. Now our nesting check is similar, so it works similarly. You can come in here, say what your source structure is. So again, we'll say GTV, what our expanded structure is, PTV, match those up. And now this is going to make sure that our GTV fits fully within our PTV. Especially for SIB, these dose volumes can get very complicated, making sure that everything nests and makes sense. Now, these are not limited to targets, both of these. You can certainly use these on OARs. Has my spinal cord to my spinal cord PRV been expanded the way that I expected? Does my spinal cord fit fully within that? Spinal cord +2, +5, whatever the case may be. All right, so let's go ahead and save those changes, and then we'll just add the rest of our templates here. So plan checks, this is going to be a read only, so I can come over here and choose my default. And you can see everything here is grayed out, so you cannot interact with your plan checks. That is for a safety reason. These should really only be applied and not edited. And same with the treat prep checks. You can add that template as well. And then for our report template, this is also just a review. All right, so now that we've added all of those checks, you can see over here on the right-hand side, we have all of those sections, and we can jump to any one of those by clicking on that. And then over here on the left, we are also seeing that those template sections have been filled out. All right, so let's start scrolling and we'll review all of those. So down here on our DVH, if I right-click, we have a bunch of options. I can toggle between absolute and relative. I can have the same crosshairs that I had in Eclipse. The nice thing here about these crosshairs are they are fully interactive. So if I click down here on this axis, I can come in here, type in an exact value, and see this crosshair snap to that and do a quick readout of that. Works great on targets as well. So if I want to say 100%, you can see it snaps the crosshairs there, and I can get that quick review, V198.8. All right, next up is our prescription check. So if you are on version 15 or higher of Eclipse, we can do our prescription checks. So if you are filling out that prescription and prescribed treatment, then you would simply see this area populate, and you can have it auto-populate if the prescriptions are linked. If they are not linked, you'll see a drop down here, and you'll be able to choose the prescription and manually link it here in ClearCheck. So it works both for people who are linking plans and not linking their plans to the prescriptions. Next up is structure checks. So we'll see all of our contours listed here, and then if there are any issues, they'll be highlighted here in red. So for instance, we have stray pixels. In this case, this 0.08 cc's, this is the size of my stray pixel, and the Z is actually the CT slice back in Eclipse. So if I want to go back and find that exact slice that stray pixel is happening on, it's going to be that Z equals 3.5. Now if I want to review that in 3D space, I just come down here, click on this 3D button, and then I can interact with this. I can zoom, I can pan, I can rotate, really find where those little stray pixels are at. It looks like I also have a slice gap issue. So I can come over here to my 3D and say, oh yes, I just need to interpolate that and I'll be all set. And then finally, it does look like my support structure is overlapping with my body. So before I start planning, before I start optimizing and calculating dose, that's a great catch to go back, scooch that couch posterior just a little bit more, make sure it clears that body contour, and then I can proceed with my planning. So for anything that ClearCheck does identify in these structure checks, you will need to go back into Eclipse, make those modifications. All right, moving on to our margin checks. So we said that we anticipated a 5 millimeter margin between our GTV and our PTV. We do give it a little bit of grace with this standard deviation, but it looks like I have one here that just isn't quite expanded the way that I had thought. It's a little bit short. And again, you can come into this 3D view and review that as well. And then our nesting checks looks good. Everything fits within, so GTV is fully within the PTV. All right, moving on to these plan checks. So all of these plan checks are optional. They can be turned on or off in the admin application. And then you have the ability to also verify okay anything that is failing similar to your dose constraints. So in this case, my CT slice thickness, according to my template, it looks like generally we expect that the CT should have a 0.25 slice thickness. In this case, this patient was scanned at 0.5. But if that's okay, I knew that going into this, I can simply say verify okay. And then just coming through, making sure everything else is passing. There are a few dose constraints that will only ever show up as blue. So blue triangles in the plan check section have a little bit of a different meaning than they do in the dose constraint section. Here in the plan check section, it generally means that something is either a warning or that ClearCheck is just bringing to your attention. You have the ability to assess whether or not this is correct. So we're pulling information, displaying it for you, but it's really up to your clinical judgment whether that is correct. All right, so then you would just come through here, make sure everything is tidied up. These are a lot of great checks for before you start the planning process. So it is going to catch a lot of things that if you wait until the end of your planning process, thing that you may need to go back and rerun your plan for. So definitely come in, load up all of these checks after you have your contours done, after you kind of start the plan, put your beams on, and then come in and make sure everything looks good before you even start the planning process. Now, our default prep checks, these are a little bit different. These checks are designed for the post-treatment planning process. So these are going to make sure that your tolerances have been set, that your field times have been set, that all of your fields have your table coordinates. So these are things that, they're not going to change your planning process, but they should be all established before you send this off for the initial physics chart check. So these are a great kind of post-planning check. And that's why we separated them into planning checks and then treatment preparation checks. All right, so in the spirit of those two things, the next thing I want to talk about is our collision check. So I'd mentioned the best time to run ClearCheck is after you have your beams put on, but before you've started planning. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this gantry icon here. And then when I come in here, you can see I have my axial slice with my isocenter. And then over here, I have this 3D model view of my plan. So I can come in here, interact with this. I can zoom, pan, rotate. This is fully interactive. Each one of these green cones represents one of those treatment angles. They're all green because they are all passing. So if I had a little bit more of an exotic plan, something with some couch kicks, maybe a very offset isocenter, prone breast patient, sometimes those can be a little bit tricky to get clearance for. And I came in here and I did see a failing beam or beams. You would display in red. And the nice thing is that this area is fully interactive. So you can see when I start to click in here that these become editable. So I can come in and type in any value that I want. So in this case, everything's passing. So I'm going to introduce a couch kick just so that we can see what a failing beam would look like. This warning that pops up just says that this is a sandbox. This is not going to impact your eclipse plan. This is really just going to show it here in ClearCheck. If you do want to apply these changes, then you would have to go back into your eclipse plan and type them in there. All right, so now you can see with that couch rotation of 25, we are getting this red beam here, and it's showing us the gantry angle that would be failing. And then if I come over here to go to the slice with the most total collisions, it's going to show me where in my axial slice that I would also have that collision. Now, if the first time that you came in here, you did see a collision, that's when you can come in and say, what does 15 look like? Okay, so 15 gives me this yellow cone. The yellow cone means it's falling within a warning distance. That warning distance comes from this area here. It is default at 2 centimeters. So if there is a potential collision within 2 centimeters of the body or the support structure, so the body or the support, everything that's outlined in yellow here, then it's going to highlight it in this yellow. And if you want to get rid of the warning, let's say we'll move this down to a couch of 5. Now we've got all green, so we know that this would be a good couch rotation to use, and then we could go back into Eclipse and apply those changes. Then I can reset, so now we're back to our original plan. So collision check does 2 types of checks. So the first one I mentioned here was with the body and the support structure. The other one is with any densities on the CT even if they are not contoured as part of the body contour. So things like alpha cradles, backlock bags, these can all be detected by ClearCheck. The HU-based collision cutoff is -700 by default. Around -900 is where we start to pick up some of those low density immobilization devices. So you can always come in here and play with that. You can window level using this slider bar here, find any of those densities, and then ClearCheck will also let you know if there is a potential collision with those backlock bags, things like that. So something worth mentioning is that ClearCheck will extend the CT in both directions to infinity. So it knows that this patient is also going to have legs and feet and a torso and a head. And so you cannot add a couch rotation of 90 degrees and get a passing beam. It will still show that as failing. However, you may run into cases such as a vertex brain where a 90-degree couch kick is perfectly acceptable. And so in that case, we have a workflow to override that infinity extension, and that's going to be down here in this area. So what you're going to do is you're going to say go to the most superior slice, and this should be beyond the couch, beyond the immobilization, and then you're going to say ignore collisions superior to, and it will populate the Z slice that you are on. Or you can say use Z from current slice if it's a little bit below that most superior slice. Now, any vertex beams that you have will show as passing. Once you are satisfied with your collision results, you can send this back to ClearCheck. And now we will see a plan check specifically for the collision check, as well as we have the ability to print those results into our report. All right, so then the rest of the icons here, ClearCalc, there is a separate video for that, but this will launch into our independent MU verification software. So I'm going to skip that for now and move on to portal dosimetry. So portal dosimetry is for versions 15.5 or higher in Eclipse. And once you click on this icon, it is going to ask you which is your verification plan that you want to run. And then it's going to import those results from the portal dosimetry workspace and display them here in a nice concise report in ClearCheck. So our information over here, our plan summary, and then each field listed out. We have our profiles, our gamma images, and then we can also push this to our ClearCheck report. All right, we're ready to print this plan. So we can go ahead and hit report. And this is going to bring us into our print preview window. Now this is a very special feature in ClearCheck, so it is going to populate all of the different sections of the report in one area, and then you'll have the opportunity to scroll through, review everything, make any changes necessary before committing it to the PDF. All right, so a little overview of this section. Over here on the left, we have our cover page. So our review of the templates, which templates we used, and then our plan information. So the course, the plan, the prescription, as well as what status it was. And you can very much change what is displayed on that cover page in the admin application. You also have this section for cover page notes. So if you like to put things like pacemaker, bolus, you can type those right in here. And now every report template can be structured a little bit differently, but I'm showing you pretty much our generic plan report template. So starting off with our kind of full report, and then we have our shifts. We do have the ability to highlight sections of the report. Again, that is done in admin. We also can change where our shifts are reported from. So in this case, the default is user origin. But if you have markers in the plan or you have multiple ISO centers in the plan, you could have it shift from your user origin to ISO center 1, and then from ISO center 1 to ISO center 2. So a very natural progression as you're going through the treatment planning process. All right, so then we have our structures, our field properties, and again, anywhere you see those 6 black dots means you can reorder something. So you can just click and drag. Then we had our reference points, our DVH, and this is going to pull over all of the same information that you would see on your Eclipse DVH. And then we have our dose constraint template. So just as we saw in that main evaluation window, Anything that had been verified okay, it would show here with the time and date stamp. Any of those comments would also display. And now we have the ability to also control our images that are captured. So you can set these to default in your template. In this case, I have an axial, sagittal, and coronal printing at the isocenter with the treatment beams turned on using relative dose. And then in these particular color schemes, you can toggle to absolute. You can leave it in relative. You can choose which contours you want to see. You can change the thickness. You can turn your beams on or off. You can zoom, pan. So whatever you would like to do to get this all set up, you can simply use the same controls as you would use in Eclipse. You can also window level. So over here on the right hand side, you can change the window leveling for any of these images. Now I've also set a default at the user origin. You can also set a default at the max dose. So lots of different things that we can go ahead and automate just to make things go a little bit faster. Now you can also add images on the fly. So if I wanted to add, for instance, that classic kind of multi-slice axial view, I would choose transverse 3x or 2x, depending on how big you want them. And then you can choose which isodose lines you want to print, as well as your spacing. So this is a very little target. Maybe we'll do just a 0.5 cm spacing. So you can see as I'm changing these parameters, it's just going through and redoing those images until I get the spacing, the size, everything that I want. And then I can go ahead and zoom in, and that looks good. So very easy to create all of those images on the fly. Next up is our beam's eye view. So these will pull the DRR straight from Eclipse. Turn on any structures that we want using the side panel here. So GTV, PTV, carina, fiducials, whatever makes sense for that patient. The setup images will show if you want them. Then we have a 3D model view of your isodose. So you can also interact with this. This is a great view for your billing team. If they require this kind of 3D view, you can have that set up for them. The portal dosimetry results, if you would like those are also available for you. And then you can also click through using this side section to jump to any other section. So we have our prescription, our structure checks, margin checks, nesting checks, plan checks, and treat prep checks. You have the ability to add all of those into the report. If you like to review them but not necessarily commit them to the patient's report, you can either remove them from your template or on a per patient basis, simply uncheck these sections over here and they will not print. So this is a great way to control on an individual basis what you do and do not want to print for your patient. All right, and then here's those collision checks. So as I mentioned, you have that 3D model view. You can see if there are any collisions, they would be listed out here. When that's all set, you have two options. You can either save this as an image, save this as a PDF, or push it to ARIA. So if you have set up that print to ARIA feature, and that does work with version 11 and higher, for me it's grayed out, but you would simply click this button here. It would pop up a box. You'd have the opportunity to title your document, and then when you hit print, it is going to send it to the patient document section for you. So just saving you a few more mouse clicks there. Now, a really cool feature that we do have is this insert button. So here is where if there's anything we're not able to automate, you can usually get it through this option. So we can insert a screenshot, a PDF, an image, or a text entry. So my favorite is this insert screenshot. So we're going to start with that one. So as soon as you click that, it's going to bring you back into Eclipse. And now you can set up anything the way that you would like to see it. So when you do that, it kind of pauses the Eclipse script. So you can interact with Eclipse. So you can come in here if you wanted to turn a light field on for a breast patient, or if you wanted to, show your bolus, you can certainly do that. If you had some other type of view that you wanted, you can set up anything that you need, whether that be fusions. You're not limited to external beam. You can also capture from plan scheduling, from the prescription area. if you wanted to go out of ARIA totally, and maybe you had an Excel spreadsheet or outside images that you wanted to capture. When you're ready, just say new, and this essentially becomes the snipping tool. You just click and highlight the area that you want to capture, and as soon as you release the mouse, it's going to populate here in the report for you. And now it does add it to the bottom of the report if you do it via this, on the fly insert. If you are routinely wanting this opportunity to do a screen capture, then you can also add that to our report templates. Then for your insert PDF, this is going to open up a file browser. You can grab any PDFs that you need. The insert text entry, this is great if you have some standard billing language that you like to include in your report. You can just copy paste it into here. And then the trash can deletes it. All right, well, that concludes our ClearCheck training for new users. Feel free to follow us on social media or reach out to us at support@radformation.com if you have any additional questions, and thank you for watching.